So far in my life, I've done more than 15,000 interviews. In the interview managers, in 82% decision is wrong. It is made wrong decision in the interview process. It showcase that having the same criteria, even the criteria if is like completely preposterous, is better than constantly moving criteria of assessing. Having biases is a very, very human thing. We are all influenced by our system one thinking, just making shortcuts and then hallucinating why we are thinking why we think.
We are live on the Objective Hiring Show with Ivana. Ivana, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm really excited to join you today.
I'm excited to have you here. And I'd love to start by just hearing a little bit more about yourself, just so our audience can understand who we're listening to today.
Yeah, so hello, I'm Ivana. I'm based in Berlin. I'm a talent experience lead, but my background is both in talent acquisition and employer branding. So far in my life, I've done more than 15,000 interviews, and I really enjoyed working with talented people and shaping talent experience. That is the reason why I'm working as a talent experience lead, focused on like first steps in the talent journey: attraction, assessment, and to up to onboarding. That is something that I'm very, very passionate about. um, what else is interesting about me? I'm very good at Wordle. That is fun fact. I have 97% success rate in Wordle. Very happy.
What's your fastest one ever? Have you ever gotten like a 2?
Of course, no, one.
You got a hole in one.
Yes, yes, because I'm always using the same word, ready, because there's a lot of vocals. So that is my strategy. Always start with the same word, and then just to maximize the vocals. Uh, um, and I have twins. They are almost 15 months. Two boys. They're really wild. They are now climbing on the furniture, so I'm like constantly trying to save their lives. Yeah, what else? Yeah, I'm a nerd. I really like to read a lot. So yeah, that is something that could be interesting about me.
Is there a German Wordle? If there is, that would be very long. Oh my God, some of those German words go on forever and ever.
True, true. Yeah, there is this word compositums in Germany.
Yes. That would be a complicated game, I think. I'm glad you led with a really amazing metric because I was going to bring it up because I saw it on your LinkedIn profile. The fact that you've done 15,000 interviews, that is a serious number. That's like Bundesliga numbers. That's not any Division 4 or 5 stuff. This is the Premier League of interviewing. How have you done so many interviews? That's just a staggering number.
I think that I think a lot of like TA professionals who are in the field for more than 10 years would have similar numbers. What I have as a like competitive advantage is that I took some time to do this assessment. So I believe in power of numbers and metrics, and if you can illustrate your authority and your gravitas through this from using specific numbers, that is your advantage point. Yeah, so every once in a while when I was doing directly interviews, because I'm not doing it right now, I would take some times every couple of months or half a year and basically just get the information from different applicant tracking systems in terms of my success rates, in terms of numbers of interviews, in terms of pass-through rates and the qualities, and just either talk with, for example, hiring managers to like, hey, our like pass-through rates are very low or very high. Shall we do something about and improve, or just think what is our secret sauce if something is working correctly? So I had this principle implemented very early from 2012 when I started working in recruitment and TA, and basically that just served the purpose. So basically, just the secret is just the sheer amount of time focus on that and just having the same approach from start, so you can actually track it.
I'm not sure if you could cast your mind back to your first interview or your first few interviews, and how you've developed as an interviewer, because we're going to talk about interviewer skill later. Like if you were to compare yourself now to then, what would be the main differences in your approach and your skills, do you think?
Yeah. So I was lucky that my background is psychology, and was also doing additional education for psychotherapists. So I really like that scientific approach, that you formulate a hypothesis and then you probe the hypothesis that you formulated through the interview, in order to prove that there is or there is not a specific competence that you would like to assess. And that is something that was there from the beginning, because that is like something that the same way how psychotherapists would approach like exploring the specific issues or a specific agenda in the psychotherapeutic approach. So basically I just use that, and I would say that is the main thing that was, like a line through my career. What is improved, and what I think it's extremely important for like hiring managers, interviewers, TA experts and professionals, is that you are setting the pace and the tone and the confidence of the other side in the conversation. That is your responsibility. You need to make sure that the other person in the conversation is bringing the um, best version of themselves, and you cannot do that if you're focusing on yourself, and you cannot do that if there is any kind of even a slight trace of self-doubt, or if there is um like I'm not sure what to say, I'm not then that is shining through, and that is actually decreasing the quality of the whole process. And that is something that I'm really um, in the interview trainings with the hiring managers and then with recruiters. I'm usually saying something that can be a little bit strange, but I say candidates in the interview process, they behave like dogs. They can smell the fear, and then they are like getting more scared, and then you have the worst interview. So don't be scared, and you really need to emanate that kind of confidence, because then the other side can show the best version of themselves.
Yes, as if an interview isn't hard enough as a candidate with their own worries. The last thing they need to be worrying about is the interviewer who's also struggling. Is that a common thing? Is that a problem among, let's say, fresh interviewers when you're first becoming like a manager and you're having your first few?
Yes, yes, and I think that it's usually when somebody is extremely diligent, and when somebody is very passionate about the topics of fairness, about topics of making sure that the decision that is outcome of the interview is justified. Then it gets even harder in a way, because you really want to make sure that everything that you're saying, on every question, every um, a topic that is covered is like leading towards fair decision. And of course, this overthinking can you know cause insecurity and visible stress. Yeah. So the ultimate goal is always to be prepared, because of course it is like desired goal to strive for fairness and justifiable outcomes. That is something that should not ever be negotiable. That is non-negotiable at all. But you need to prevent the insecurity or this self-doubt by extensive preparation.
When you mentioned, yeah, the interviewer being a little bit doubtful or hesitant, I hadn't really thought of that before. And so, as you were discussing that, I was trying to think back to the first interviews I did as an interviewer, would have been pretty much 10 years ago exactly. And yeah, I I'm struggling to remember the details, but I'm sure I would have been more hesitant and yeah, yeah, probably more worried and anxious than I would be now for sure. Uh, was it the case for you as well? Like, can you cast your mind back to when you were first studying? Is that one of the main differences between then and now? Is that you maybe didn't quite have that experience to fall back on?
I need to think about that. Um, of course, we always, like we are like assessing reality based on the information that we have. And there is this Dunning-Kruger symptom basically we are extremely confident at the beginning. We think, yeah, like we know this stuff, you know. So it's a bit hard for me to like step back and think how I thought um, back then. Yes, it is. But like the good thing is, and then I think what is the um, great stuff about interviewing and working with talent in general is that constant need for improvement and for adding new knowledge and new context and assessing reality from different perspectives. For example, right now there is a like strong reliance on for example AI for like note taking and something like that. When I started, I knew as well, Tim, yeah, the note taking was like a big part of either interview training or how we actually approach it. Like, is it going to be visible? Is it going to be distracting? Shall I use computer? Shall I write down? And and that is something that right now with the AI note taking tools is completely out of the question. We are even not even asking these questions anymore and change very quickly.
Yes, and I've always found, yeah, in interviews, it was such a difficult task to take notes, look at your questions, listen to what the candidate's saying, judge their body language and other nonverbal cues, and somehow do all of that and keep on time. Oh my god, like that's a very cognitively difficult task. So thank God the AI note takers taken one of those things off our plate.
Yes, exactly.
For hiring managers, uh, and the fact that it's not that common to receive training on how to hire. Actually, in general, training for hiring is very rare. Maybe training for interviewing, not quite as rare. Uh, Apart from newer hiring managers maybe being a little bit anxious and that rubbing off on the candidate in a negative way, are there any other things that they need to do better? Any other kind of common mistakes or shortcomings that new interviewers might have?
Yeah, I as you noticed, Tim, I'm really passionate about the numbers. And I really like to showcase that to the hiring manager. So basically, if you say there is this research from Gallup that says that in 82%, for example, if you're in the interview for the future managers, in 82% decision is wrong. It is made wrong decision in the interview process. And we showcase that and using that as a like the starting point in the thinking process. It's really focused the focus the hiring team, hiring managers and interviewers to actually assess it. And I really like how you make distinction between a training for hiring and training for interviewing. And I think that um, we should of course make that distinction, and I really love that because it's really interviewing is just one part and the method of successful hiring, but the method that can and should be used to make your decision effectively. So you should always have in mind, as for example, hiring manager, like how do you make decision, what criteria are you using, and what would you like to achieve. Sometimes we are doing stuff because that is either how it was done or like we think that it is supposed to do, but it is not quite clear what we would like to achieve in the interview process. For example, what is the main goal for the for example interview. And that is when I do interview training with a new interviewers or hiring manager, that is for me the most important thing, to actually for hiring manager to establish the goal for each interview, so they know what is the outcome, what would they like to assess, and how they would know that they managed to do that. Like how the after interview, how would they know like this was the, I don't know, half an hour well spent. I learned something about this particular person, that can help me make the better hiring decision. Because if we don't have that, then it's something that is usually happening is that, especially you usually have more than one person assessing, and then um, there is that prevalence of, like one person had an opinion that is a little bit, maybe louder or more expressed, and then it's painting over and overcoming the overall impression of the candidates. I didn't like that, that particular candidate was late or something like that, and that's paints over all the impression of the candidate. But it usually won't happen that much if you have that kind of set goal.
Yes, and back to your point before around hypotheses and whatnot, if you don't have an hypothesis to begin with, if you don't have a goal to try to hit, then you're just sort of flapping in the wind. Uh, and it's so easy, I noticed also for similar to what you're saying, for hiring processes to derail what I would call like the moving the goalpost problem. Like some new interviewer comes in and they have their opinion view over what a good analyst is, and then suddenly you're evaluating for things that, hold on, like we didn't do this at the start of the process. Why are we doing it now? And a lot of the time, I think the difficulty is these these opinions or views are legitimate and fine. It's not outrageous. It's like, oh, I didn't think they're a team player. They wouldn't get on in that environment X, Y, Z. But if the initial criteria don't have that, then why are we now suddenly evaluating it? Just need to keep people on the same page, don't we?
Exactly. That reminds me what you were saying about this famous experiment from, not experiment, but the study from Daniel Kahneman, that like having the same criteria, even the criteria if is like completely preposterous, is better than constantly moving criteria of assessing. I think that it was about, choosing a secretary or something like this. A bit, like it was 60s or 50s, so it's a bit sexist. So, like that like that what would be the characteristics of the best secretary. But I remember that it was like that, like you choose one criteria and like constantly have the same. It's better than just, moving around.
Yes. And well, speaking of Daniel Kahneman, I feel like one thing that's probably changed over the past 10 years ish a lot in hiring is an acknowledgement of biases. We haven't fixed them, but at least you'd be hard pressed to find someone working in hiring or a senior hiring manager who hasn't at least thought about, oh, you know what, I might have biases for or against certain types of people. How about yourself? Have you ever reflected on your typical biases of candidates you are? I just always love this type of candidate or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I must say that, of course, I like having biases is a very, very human thing. Like we are all influenced by our system one thinking. Just making shortcuts and then hallucinating why we are thinking why we think. I actually my master thesis was related to the specific biases and like development of the biases, like how it is evolving in the childhood and after that in adult. And then usually we like it was focused on appearance, and how we are actually attributing the most valued characteristics of one society to the people that are being perceived as attractive. And in Western cultures, the most attractive characteristics are intelligence and extroversion, or like just being. So yeah, I would say that yeah, I really need to make sure that. And sometimes when I was doing interviews, I really wanted to, for example, not do the video call at the beginning, just to prevent myself from the biases that I know that I have, that I was actually investigating in the past, that the people that we think that are, like representative, that they would be more intelligent and subsequently more adequate for some job.
I spoke to someone this morning actually, and I'd love to share like their hiring philosophy with you to get your thoughts on it. They said that basically for their whole career, for decades, their main hiring strategy was to find the diamonds in the rough, the candidates that they thought were systematically undervalued in some way. And for him, because he works in data science, it was mainly candidates who were a bit introverted, quite shy, undersold themselves, maybe sometimes a bit on the spectrum, didn't like interviewing. They just, interviewing itself did not suit their skills. They were an amazingly smart people, very technically gifted, that didn't want to get up in front of a room full of people and sell themselves. They just don't like it. And so he'd made a lot of amazing hires by kind of tapping into this and almost dismissing the common things that we would normally select for, which is this really communicative, smiley, friendly, extroverted person. uh, how do we overcome this bias? Because it's like hiring is almost inherently a bit biased against introverted, quiet, shy people. Is there a case of, yeah? How do you think about that problem?
Yeah, so it is very interesting topic, and I think my main thought on this topic is accessibility, and that you need to adapt the process to the specific group. So really think about the limitations that your current system is having, and the process is having, and how it is affecting the specific group that you would like to uh, whose presence you would like to make more prominent, and also like just in terms of presence. um, and I usually you can start with asking, either do you need some specific context or specific support during the interview, and then actually um, accommodate the candidate. That is one way of dealing with the situation. And the second is also to, and also in the parallel, you need to inform the hiring team on basically how they need to um, uh, uh, behave and be prepared. Mm, yeah, I need to think a little bit more about this, because this is the topic that is very dear, and I think it's extremely important right now. But I haven't found the systematic study that can give me the exact formula that I can just implement in the best way. And I would really like to find something that could be relevant here. I like, from my experience, I would know if somebody is a little bit more introverted, or somebody who is neurodivergent. They probably won't like the stressful environment with a time set limit, when you need to like stress test in terms of thinking, when there is like a really huge discrepancy of power between interviewer and interviewee, where it is like one interview and then three, or like panel of people writing something without expressions. But just giving that power to the other side, hey, saying, hey, what would make you shine the best way possible, is sometimes yeah, maybe the best way. And that's why, just bring back to this, like, if you need anything special to make you shine, please let us know, and then really be committed to make that happen.
I can share one interesting example of some experimentation that Canva, the Australian tech product, did. This was quite a number of years ago now. So this would be maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when they were first scaling up their software engineering team. And they noticed that they had, and I can't remember which one it was, they either had a live whiteboarding coding session as a step, or they had a take-home project as a step. I can't remember which one it was. And the problem they were trying to solve for was not actually making the process more fair. The problem they were trying to solve for was a big drop-off. So at one of these stages, they were noticing a big drop-off. They then did something quite interesting. They gave the candidates the option of saying, well, if you like to do a live coding session, you're an extrovert, you've only got half an hour, you just want to get in and do it, do the whiteboarding session. If you really would rather pull your teeth out than start coding in front of people, which is very anxiety inducing, then that's fine. Do the take-home assessment. It's going to take you more time, but you can do it in the comfort of your home. And by giving the candidates the option, they got the drop off to zero. Everyone ended up going through that gate. So that's an interesting way around it, which could help not accidentally deter either extroverts who just want to get on with it or introverts who want to do it quietly. But I guess also adds a lot of complication, because then you've got two different stages at the same time. How do you compare the performance? It becomes kind of practically difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, but like it can probably be standardized. And when you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, that's a question of control. If the candidate or interviewee has the perception that they are, like masters of their destiny, that something that they are doing is actually can cause them to present themselves in the best way possible, then of course everybody is more willing to actually do it. When you have that kind of like external locus of control, when there you are basically just like, oh, I don't know, I'm a straw, wind is blowing around me, then of course you are then not that keen on behaving in your best interest. So yeah, it makes sense. But I'm just thinking how, in terms of how to standardize those, probably then the outcome needs to be standardized. You need to have the specific outcome that is standardized, and then use that as assessment point.
Someone I was speaking to this morning, again, someone different. This is part of the great thing about doing what I do. I learn from all these amazing, smart people like yourself. They'd mentioned something subtle, which I hadn't thought of, probably because I've been doing a remote first company for 6 years. So I've kind of forgotten what it was like to be in offices. I haven't had an interview myself for 10 years, so I've forgotten a little bit. But the difference between doing an interview in the comfort of your home office or bedroom versus going into an office, dealing with all of that stuff. And as my guest described, that sometimes the offices, especially in large corporates, are quite clinical. He said it almost reminds me of going to the doctor, which is the last thing you'd ever want. Not many people like that. And so I wonder if even something as simple as you can do it from home, you can do it in the office, maybe that could almost help those particularly anxious candidates if that's what they're after.
Yeah, to have the sense of control. Yeah. And sometimes, people are using, of course, probably more extroverted, like, oh, I'm going to dress up nicely and show that I really care. Of course, that can also be the strategy. So, yeah, I'm very curious how this change in terms of the market is changing, and how much it would influence. Because last time when we have this employer driven market was before this big changes in AI, the whole push for diversity and inclusion, the whole enlightenment of our own intrinsic biases. That was basically everything happened in this candidate driven market. And I'm very curious how this is going to spill, because like you cannot put the squeezed toothpaste into a tube when it's already, when you know that you are biased, but when you know the importance and you're intrinsically believing that like in a more just world, how can we that like just meet with a more employer driven market that is happening right now?
Yeah, I get the sense that fairness and running the fairest process possible is probably not top priority for most companies at the moment. That's my perception. probably because of the fact that they have the balance of power now, because they're getting inundated with candidates. And if anything, I feel like there's increasing distrust on both sides because companies are complaining a lot about the AI generated CVs, or the resumes are bullshit, or the candidates aren't going through the process. So there's like, a bit of distrust. That's my perception. How do you read it at the moment?
Maybe, yeah. I just think that that there is a lot of changes, and I think that we are in this turbulent phase, and there is a lot of like this just storming of criteria. So I'm really really curious how is that going to pan up. Yeah, I think that yeah, absolutely true. Related to that usage of AI from one side, from the other side, in terms of like actually meeting that fairness is actually um, providing the best that there is no difference between just and productive, that basically should be equal, and not you're making concession for production to be more just. It's not like that, and it should not be like that, and it was never that like that.
Uh, so speaking of bias, we can recognize our own biases. That's fine. Some of them we understand, some of them we don't ever really know about. And we can control it, I guess, at least if we're conscious of it, then we can start to control it. But are there other ways that we can help reduce bias in hiring?
Yeah, there was one very interesting study in published in Harvard Business Review that most of like unconscious biases trainings would flop. I think, like, I cannot remember the exact statistic, but it was like 60 or 70%, something like huge number. And I was really thinking about that, and like what could be probable cause. And I just think that sometimes like there is this vicarious expectation effect in cognitive sciences, that basically when you think that you have done something, or that basically you're thinking about something, or you already done it, it's basically a done deal. You don't need to deal with that anymore. And I think that that is the most important takeaway here. There is no one training that you can pass and then you're done with your unconscious biases. There it is a constant process that you really need to reevaluate throughout your career. There's no one solution that is hitting all of your blind spots and then you are safe without biases, you're making best decision possible. No, you constantly need to keep pushing and keep evaluating um, your like how you're making decisions, and also making sure that you're like shedding the light to your own blind spots. So I think that is the reason, and that is the main thing. And how can you do that? My um, um, approach here is to actually decrease the friction points as much as possible. So basically systems of reminders, basically over communicate through the automated messages in every touch points from the hiring team, hiring manager. Message needs to be very clear. Have you considered your own biases? Do you know what it like is? And also a really short description of the potential with in form of questions. Is there a like one particular characteristic that actually like everything else is in the dark, because that one is like overshadow, yeah, like my brain. Blah. um and in other questions, is your opinion of this candidate influenced by like some similar characteristic that you perceive that to be clustered together, or similar thing, just to constantly have series of notifications, series of touch points that are focused on decreasing bias. Because like if bias forming and is systematically influencing our thinking, we need to be smart and then have this whole system in terms of in our correspondence and communication integrated. Just to
Yes, exactly. And we're talking about the hiring context, but we make hundreds of decisions a day. We need to be conscious of it for everything, because otherwise we're making worse decisions. Maybe that's where the penny needs to drop. Like, you are making worse decisions because of the biases. Whereas I don't feel like people have internalized that maybe.
Yes, exactly. Very well said. Exactly. You're making worse decision because of bias, not better.
Now, one kind of problem I have with the unconscious bias discussion is, I think, in some sense, it papers over overt discrimination, in the sense that we've almost said, oh, this is, I've just got some unconscious biases. They're in my brain. I can't control it. It's nothing to do with me. But at the end of the day, they're still racists. They're still sexists who are explicitly racist or sexist. I'll give you an interesting example. So I'm sure you've seen these studies, and there's probably been the equivalent one in Germany, one done in Australia a couple of years ago by the University of Sydney. They got tens of thousands of resumes, split them into three groups. The first group had English first and last name. Second group had an English first name, Chinese last name. Third group had Chinese first and last name. The sets of CVs were otherwise the same. They then applied to thousands of jobs in Sydney and Melbourne, different domains, different industries, marketing, sales, cleaning, everything. And then they measured how many callbacks they got and the rate of those callbacks. And to cut a long story short, the first group, which had an English first and last name, got 12% callback rate. The third group, which had a Chinese first and last name, got a 4% callback. So all else equal, if you apply to a job in Australia with a Chinese name, you have 1/3 only the chance for callback as with an English name, holding everything else constant. It's like a really nice experiment to prove systemic racism. So we can talk about unconscious bias as much as we like, and maybe some of this is unconscious, but there's also just racism.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, there is similar study in Germany for it was also very interesting. They also, because in Australia, here in Germany, it's very popular to have a like picture on your resume. So it was focused on Turkish minority, and then if you have a female candidate with a headscarf, and they also had like Turkish sounding versus German sounding name, and I would say that the results are comparable. I can dig up the exact study, but it's very comparable. Yeah, I just think that we all believe that we are good humans, and even people who are behaving badly, they have the way of describing the world in a way that shows them as a good human being. I don't think that there is not a human in the world that thinks otherwise. So actually exposing this dichotomies and exposing this constantly is what is important. Exposing this um, results is something that is important. So basically, maybe in every uh, like beginning of the interview, in like the stage of like set up the hiring panel, and then just repeating that one more time, and basically making sure the same way how when you're on the flight, you're like, even though you're a frequent flyer, you still need to save the instructions. The same way here, even if you're doing the interview constantly, you still need to be reminded that what if, for example, in the specific culture, are there like systemic prejudice and obstacles that the groups need to overcome, and what does that mean for the business? Also always connect to the business, because of this new context, when we have this schism between justice and productivity, which is completely like not real, and should be completely abandoned as a topic.
And it reminds me of, I guess, an almost similar thing, which is there are, just, I guess, similar to a bias, but not quite. It's some criteria that you might have for a role that are just quite subjective. And I'll give you one great example, would be communication skills. What someone classifies as good or not good communication skills must vary a lot. And I could easily imagine how, if an Australian was interviewing the average Dutch person, the average Dutch person is a lot more direct than the average Australian, who's very indirect. So they might come across as rude to us. We might come across as fluffy and flowery to them. And they're like, can you just tell me what you think? So one's not necessarily right or wrong, but I could easily imagine how, as a candidate going into either of those markets, you would fall by the wayside very quickly. So is it also just thinking about our broader subjective thoughts over some of these things as well?
Yeah, yeah, very well point. Yeah, I also think that I really love this book of Culture Map. It is exploring different differences between cultures and how we are expressing ourselves. And like I would say this is the same thing about the most valuable characteristics. And also it's about the stories we are telling ourselves, as for example, um, uh, um, uh, mm, members of specific nations. I remember when I moved to Germany, because I'm originally from Balkan region. From you can actually guess that from my name and surname. Um, my Mediterranean Slavic culture was clashing with the German culture, which is more like bigger distance between authorities and also much more direct. So for me, that was a bit wow. Like why we start always with negatives? Why are we like? Can we first yeah, warm up a little bit? That for me was like wow, what? um yeah, but same like as for the other biases, I really think that if you are in the market that historically or right now, I think that there's no market that doesn't have overlapping in other events, because this is what we are aiming for with the globalization. I think that just be mindful of and having the specific focus and interest in the topic of cultural difference is extremely valuable. And also maybe having the assessment, not assessment, but basically understanding of the cultural difference is a part of your interviewing training.
Yes, and I would have thought it'd be especially important in Europe. You have so many neighbors with very different cultures to each other. We're on an island in the middle of nowhere, so maybe it's slightly different. But also an opportunity, maybe, because I know lots of Europeans speak several languages. The average English speaking, as a first language, tends to speak fewer languages. So I feel like we miss out on a little bit of sharing other people's cultures because we don't know as many languages. That's my view. And so, yeah, maybe learn a language, learn more about other cultures, and then you might generally be more receptive to thinking about other people, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. The way I think that the languages that we are speaking are shaping the way how we think. I was always, like for example, like in Serbo-Croatian or in Spanish or in Italian, it's people are talking over each other. For example, in German, there's like really faux pas. You don't do that. And I was always thinking, why is that? And then one time I was discussing with some friend of mine, and then we discovered that verb in German is at the end of the sentence. So you really need to wait for the person to finish the sentence to understand the context, because usually verb is a like a bearer of the context. So of course, and if you have the languages where the verbs are like the second or first place or just moving around, then of course you can I'm jumping over you and proving the point that I'm engaged. So of course I'm not a linguist, but I think that that could be interesting point, because if you know the language, the way the language is used is shaping your thinking.
Yes, and well, you speak Serbo Croatian, English, German, anything else?
A little bit of French.
Wow, amazing! There you go. God, I love Europeans. So many languages. Does your personality change when you change language?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. yeah. Yeah, yeah. I tend to like yeah, because like, my language is pretty small, so I tend to speak with my children in several Croatian, and then my partner usually would say you sound completely different. And also I would say that there is like different usage of imperative, for example, like usage of imperative in Slavic languages is not that uncommon. For example, imperative in German is extremely rude. So yeah.
Yes, you have to adjust it. And I know, yeah, similar in Spanish, they use a bit more of the imperative than they do in English. And it sounds a bit rude to my ear, but it's just completely
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I remember when usually when I want to be very, cordial with somebody, I would tell, because it's like a different translation in my mind when I'm not adapted, or when I'm very tired, I would say, "Tell me," and that sound that didn't sound very rude to somebody from English or German speaking. Yeah, tell me.
Well, tell me, Ivana, if you could ask our next guest one question about hiring, what question would you ask them?
Yeah, how to effectively use AI and like whole new paradigm shift in making the process, um, hiring process, just and objective.
That is a question I will level at our next guest. And yeah, I'm interested to hear the answer as well. I personally am quite optimistic about AI in being able to, if implemented correctly, should be able to make a big dent on some of those issues we were talking about before, the bias, the discrimination. It could be more objective, it could be more consistent. Hopefully, it's actually implemented that way.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, yeah. My my only I would say dilemma or like thinking point here is the topic of responsibility, because if you have human who is making a decision, the human is bearer of responsibility of that decision. But if you have AI, this responsibility is dispersed, and I think that should be really addressed very carefully.
Yes, exactly. If the AI makes a mistake, who owns that mistake? Yeah, that's a big problem. I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation and really enjoyed it. It's flowing easily. We could have gone for hours. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your insights with our audience.
Thank you. It was really amazing. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you, and it was just a pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.